Listen up, we have some important information on listening that could help your career. Joining us for this week's Smith Business Close-Up is Ken White, Director of the Office of Marketing Communications at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. Ken, thanks for being with us.
Jeff, my pleasure. How are you?
Good to see you. I heard somebody explain once the difference between simply hearing and actually listening to something. Is that how you see it?
Oh, very much so. That's a good way to introduce this, actually. A hearing is when you're driving down the highway for maybe an hour or so, and suddenly you wake up and say, I don't remember the last 20 miles. That's hearing. You were able to drive, right? You had your hands on the wheel. You didn't hurt anybody, but that's hearing. Listening is paying attention to the road, knowing exactly what mile marker you're on, paying attention to the speed limit, and so on and so forth. That's the difference between the two.
I know you're interested in something called active listening. What's the idea?
Very important. Most of us are on that listening level. In fact, 80% of us tend to be on the listening level. Active listening is where you're giving someone your undivided attention. You're listening to every word they're saying, and you're not only listening to what they're saying verbally, but you're listening to what they're saying non-verbally as well. And if you cut out all the noise and all the distractions out from around you, and you pay very close attention and zoom in on what they're saying verbally and non-verbally, that's active listening. Difficult to do.
How does one develop those skills?
First, you have to want to develop those skills. And most people often don't think that's a very big priority. But one of the ways to develop it is to simply practice. I think there are two ways, actually. One is to practice and to get into situations and say, I'm not a very good active listener. I'll try this for a minute, see where I can go, and then move it up to 2 minutes and 3 minutes and so forth. But we tend to be, especially executives tend to be talkers, not listeners. So a good way to do it is go into a conversation and say 50-50. I'm going to listen half the time actively, and I'll speak half the time. And if you can try that, that gets you on the right path.
Is this going to help me when I'm introduced to 4 or 5 people at once and 30 seconds later I can't remember anybody's name?
No, sorry.
Oh, well.
I wish I had that trick. I'm terrible at that as well. No, but this is more of when you do speak with those 4 or 5 people throughout the night, on your way home in the car, you remember what they said, and you're able to digest that and actually use it and file that in your information and intelligence bank, and you're way ahead of the game as opposed to small talk. You actively listen and you've got it.
Talk a little about the career importance of this and how it does put somebody ahead of the game.
Wow, yeah. Imagine having a boss who listens intently to everything you say. Very rare, because most executives, when a subordinate is in the office, I need to meet, let's talk, many executives are forming their question, the next question, while that subordinate is talking. And so imagine how happy people would be if they knew when they went into their boss's office that the boss was, in fact, listening, cutting out all of that other noise that can come into a conversation and focusing directly on that person and listening to what they have to say. It'd be a great partnership.
Is there a flip side of this if you're giving a presentation or just in a business conversation and you want the other person to actually hear and understand what you're saying, but you know that they're probably not good listeners? What do you do?
Well, yeah, we tend to be trained to speak. So I think there are a lot of things you can do that add on to your words that can help you get across to people. Most of those are nonverbal, with hand gestures, moving around, walking over to that person, should it be a classroom or a lecture situation. But at the same time, we can do things with inflection of our voice, our rate of speech, our pace, and so forth, that help us sort of raise the bar, so to speak, when we're communicating. And that can help pull that other person in a little bit. But that's a good question, because not everybody is all that fired up about listening to what you have to say.
There you go. Oh, a good segment here. We enjoyed every single word of it. That's Ken White joining us from the Smith School of Business. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jeff.